So hey, Chris, I'd love for you to, maybe tell us, how did you meet John Wimber?
Well, I met Chris first, his son. Well, sorry. I started going to the church when they met at Kenyon High School in the gymnasium. I was part of a youth group in Dana Point, California, with Chuck Smith Jr. was the pastor, so Chuck Smith's son. And on Sunday nights, the youth group would go up, and Chuck Jr. would go up and listen to this guy John Wimber, and we were kind of, hearing about what was going on there. And we would go and just be kind of amazed and like watching stuff happen, and it was real new to us. And we kind of brought that back, not me, but Chuck Jr. kind of brought that back to Calvary Chapel and Dana Point. And so, like the prophetic and praying for the sick, things like that. So that was probably in around 1980, something like that, 81, I think.
Okay.
And then I'd never met John at that point. I was just a kid. I was probably 16 or something. But we all started growing up, just getting in these like punk rock bands as kids, mm-hmm. and we were all getting saved. And so we play at churches. And Chris was in a band called the Lifesavers, and I was in a band called the Spiritones. And kindly, Chris would ask us to come open up for the Lifesavers now and again.
Oh, cool.
And that's how I met Chris.
Okay. So that's the early 80s. Then you eventually went on to do worship for the Vineyard. You led worship, and you made albums for them. So how long, you basically knew John Wimber from 1981, or knew of John Wimber, and then we're also around him from basically 1981 all the way until the end of his life in 1997?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I'd love to know, like, what's the most impactful thing that John Wimber said, or, what he did for you? Like, what stands out when you think about John Wimber? Like, oh, this is the stuff that I really appreciated about his ministry.
Well, he became, he was always the pastor and always like someone we all looked up to. We always looked up to him as a musician, but he was also Chris's dad, and Chris was one of my best friends, and so he was just really kind to me, I think, for one, because he knew that me and Chris were buddies, and two, when I did a record, my first record for Vineyard, for Chris's sub-label that he had, John was really proud of his son, like Chris is starting a record label, and I was the second artist after the Violet Burning to sign with Chris, and they had national distribution, and so I think John was just really like, that's my boy as far as Chris goes, and then, but because of our friendship, me and Chris, John watched out for us too. I remember one thing he said to me and the Violet Burning guys, because we were also playing in clubs and stuff too, and trying to evangelize and do that thing. He said, just make sure you always keep one foot in the church. And that didn't always, I don't know if that sunk in the beginning, but it was so important because, I think a lot of Christian artists, they'll go, it's second best being a Christian artist. In the Christian music industry, mm-hmm. Everyone wants to make it in the secular industry or whatever, but John would always say, make sure you keep one foot in the church. And the reason was I know he realized the spiritual battle that we all just go through as humans, that who's after our soul. And with the covering of the church, he was all for people going out in the world and doing their thing. But he was saying, why would you go do that without the support and the love of the body of Christ
Mm.
to be with you, but also to have grounding in it too.
Mm.
So that was a pretty cool thing that I'll always remember.
That's awesome. So when you think about, kind of like I guess maybe John Wimber's legacy, everybody that I've ever met that has that had personal contact with John has like the John story for them, and so I'd love to know like what's the one story about John Wimber that that you'll always remember. Like when you think about John Wimber, one of the first things that you're like, oh man, I'll never forget.
Well, I'll never forget a time where he wrote 3 or 4 songs. He said that when he first got saved, and he asked if I would learn them with my band. He liked I had like a blues band kind of thing, folky kind of blues band. He said that I'd love to hear your interpretation of these songs. And so we spent a whole night in the studio and ordered food and just recorded together. And it was him, John on the Rhodes. I was the singer, and Sleepy Ray on electric guitar, a guy, Paul Martin, a friend of mine, on bass, and a drummer named Icky. And I think Kevin Prosh played keys. I can't remember if he was in that. Anyway, so we spent a whole night doing that, and the songs were actually really cool. They were like old Ray Charles songs or something,
Hmm.
And I wish we had those recordings. They got recorded over, and there was a cassette somewhere, and it's lost. But it was when he had a tumor in his sinus somewhere in there, so he would try and sing me these vocals to teach me the songs, and it was tough for him, but he just wanted to get them recorded, And I don't know if he knew, maybe because he didn't have, I don't know how much longer he lived after that, but it was just really a special time for us, for sure.
That's amazing. So, some people will know of Sugar Hill Revival. You've got projects that you've done over the years. What are you like? What are you working on right now? Are there any projects you're working on? Is there anything we can look forward to? Is there anything that we can buy?
Well, I mean, I have records on iTunes or Amazon, all that stuff, but the latest thing I've been doing, I have a really good friend of mine that I grew up with, who's an amazing piano player, arranger, and I live in San Juan Capistrano. I live right next to the mission there, and he leads the music every morning for Mass, and he also leads this Catholic Men's Fellowship. And I was raised Catholic. I have a great memories of going to Catholic school and everything. I don't have any problems. I don't resonate with all the theology. We have some differences, but anyways, once a month we lead worship together for the Catholic Men's Fellowship, and he's written a lot of these short prayers, just piano and vocal, and he has me sing them, and we've recorded a few of them. And they're so beautiful. He writes the melodies, and he'll take a prayer like from the Valley of Vision or something like that. And that's the latest thing I've been doing, and I really enjoy that.
Cool.
Yeah.
So for those of us that can't go, is there any plans to put out any projects at all in the future?
We might do something like that. We were talking about doing an Advent record that's all prayers and recited prayers and sung prayers, and then do a Lent one as well.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
So it's a combination of like worship, music, plus litanies, and oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Cool. Wow. Yeah. Well, hey, thanks a lot, for taking the time to just talk about Wimber.
Sure.
I'm going to end you with this. What's the one thing right now that God is doing in your life that you are really excited about?
He's just constantly reminding me that it all started with just the two of us. And I have been easily gone into this journey as a Christian and walking out my faith through being busy and doing a lot of things, and that's okay. It's just that he's reminding me of that. Remember when it all started? It was just you and me, and that's how it's gonna end as well. So I want to focus a little bit more on that.